Let's see. So let's go over to healthychildren.org, brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and hear what they have to say about fluoride. Let's look at some of the frequently asked questions specific to oral health. Fluoride for children. Fluoride from drinking water and other sources like toothpaste and mouth rinse can help prevent tooth decay, which are dental caries or cavities, and make your child's teeth stronger. Here are some common questions that parents ask about fluoride, about how fluoride helps protect children's oral health. Question: why do children need fluoride? I hate the way they word this stuff. It's all programming. Programming. Why do children need fluoride? Well, fluoride is a natural mineral that can slow or stop cavities from forming. They make it sound so harmless. Here's something important. Bacteria in the mouth combine with sugars and make acid that can harm the outer layer of the tooth enamel. Okay, so bacteria combining with sugar, creating an acid to destroy your teeth. So we're not going to address that at all. Not even at all. We're not going to say reduce your consumption of sugar, or maybe rinse your mouth every day with a half and half water and hydrogen peroxide to keep some of that bacteria at bay. No. We're going to go to fluoride. Fluoride protects teeth from damage and helps rebuild the enamel. Many communities have added fluoride to the tap water to help fight cavities. Children should drink plenty of water and brush with toothpaste that has fluoride in it. That's right, get that intake of fluoride as high as you possibly can. Question: is fluoridated water safe for my children? Oh, a resounding yes. The American Academy of Pediatrics, or the American Dental Association, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention all agree that water fluoridation is safe and works to prevent tooth decay. Community water fluoridation has been shown to reduce tooth decay by 25%. This is debatable, but even if it was a reduction in cavities by 25%, the real important question is, what's the trade-off? At what cost? Right? Okay, so let's look at a little video that they have. Actually, before I do that, I need to pause. All right, sorry about that. So let's hear what they have to say.
Pediatricians are general child health advocates, and one of our jobs is to help ensure that families are aware of all the various ways that they can help to keep their kids healthy. Historically, there's been a great divide between the mouth and the rest of the body, and we as pediatricians, one of our jobs is to help to bridge that divide and bring the mouth back into the fold of the body. One easy tip outside of brushing twice a day with fluoride toothpaste is drinking tap water. There has been increasing concern about the safety of fluoride. Fluoride is a mineral that's naturally occurring and that most bodies of naturally occurring water already have in it. And so when we talk about community fluoridated water, we're talking about simply tweaking the level of fluoride in water that's already there most of the time to levels that are going to be perfect for preventing dental decay. There's been a tremendous amount of research done over the decades to show over and over and over fluoride works. It's one of the most effective tools we have to prevent dental decay, and fluoride is safe.
Wow. So I'm not going to deny that pediatricians have the best interest at heart, but what they don't have is the knowledge of the consequences of the decisions they've been programmed to make. And they always say stupid stuff like this. Well, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the ADA and the CDC, they all agree. Experts agree. 4 out of 5 dentists say do this. And that's enough for them to go, well, yeah, then we better do it, without ever looking at the actual data, which we're going to do, but let's continue down this page to see how much they push fluoride on people. When should my child start using fluoride toothpaste? Well, we recommend using a smear, whatever that is, a smear of fluoride toothpaste twice a day when the first tooth appears and until age 3. Once your child has turned 3, then you can move up to a pea-sized amount of fluoride toothpaste that can be used. What if we live in a community where the water is not fluoridated? Oh, what should we do if we're missing out on this wonderful blessing called fluoride? Oh, just check with your local water utility agency to find out if your water has fluoride or not. If it doesn't have fluoride, or you use well water, ask your pediatrician or dentist if your child is at high risk for cavities. What do they know about that? Are they asking you what your diet is like, if you're getting enough magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin K, things like that that are going to direct the calcium to the bone and the teeth? They don't care. They're going to say, use fluoride. The doctor may recommend that you buy fluoridated water or even give you a prescription for fluoride drops or tablets for your child to chew on or ingest. I mean, they're going to literally poison your kid. Should my child get fluoride varnish? No. Oh, wait, they say yes. Fluoride varnish is used to help prevent or slow down tooth decay. Your pediatrician will apply the varnish starting when your baby is 6 months old at well-child visits. You better believe a lot of that gets swallowed. It's painted on the top and the sides of each tooth and hardens quickly. Then it is brushed off after 4 to 12 hours. It's recommended that children have varnish applied 2 to 4 times a year until they're 5 years old. You're just poisoning your kids, guys. What should I know about fluoride if I am breastfeeding or using infant formula? Okay, here we go. These are little babies. When they are younger than 6 months old, breastfed babies and babies fed infant formula do not need fluoride supplements or formula mixed with water. Or formula mixed with water that is fluoridated. It is safe to use fluoridated water, though, to mix formula if your baby is younger than 6 months old. What? But there is a small risk of fluorosis. Ask your pediatrician for more advice. And they're going to tell you, fluorosis is not a big deal. It's just aesthetic. You're just going to have little white spots on your teeth. What is dental fluorosis? And will fluoridated water mixed with infant formula increase the risk? Fluorosis usually just appears as a very faint white streak on the teeth. Often it is only noticeable by a dental expert during an exam. Mild fluorosis is not painful and does not affect the function or health of the teeth. And remember, everything about this is just focusing on the teeth, nothing else. This is talking about systemic fluoride, okay? Drinking it, applying it in the mouth in a way that's going to get absorbed systemically as well. It doesn't go beyond anything outside of the mouth, but we need to. Okay, so we have the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Dental Association, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention telling us we need fluoride to have healthy teeth and mouth. But what does the science actually say? Well, here's a very recent study. Fluoride exposure from infant formula, which they just told you is, don't worry about it. You can use fluoridated water to create your infant formula or to reconstitute your infant formula. So fluoride exposure from infant formula and child IQ in a Canadian birth cohort. Let's just hit the conclusion. Exposure to increasing levels of fluoride in tap water was associated with the diminished nonverbal intellectual abilities. The effect was more pronounced among formula-fed children. Oh, so we're actually causing brain damage. Here's some more. Prenatal fluoride exposure and cognitive outcomes in children at 4 and 6 to 12 years of age in Mexico. Conclusion. In this study, higher prenatal fluoride exposure in the general range of exposures reported for other general population samples of pregnant women and non-pregnant adults was associated with lower scores on tests of cognitive functions in offspring at ages 4 and 6 to 12 years. More signs of brain damage. What else do we have? Prenatal fluoride exposure and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, symptoms in children at 6 to 12 years of age in Mexico City. Higher levels of fluoride exposure during pregnancy were associated with the global measures of ADHD and more symptoms of inattention as measured by the CRS-R in the offspring. It just goes on and on and on. Fluoride exposure and intelligence in school-age children, evidence from different windows of exposure and susceptibility. Prenatal and childhood excessive fluoride exposure may impair the intelligence development of school children. Furthermore, children with prenatal fluoride exposure had lower IQ scores than children who were not prenatally exposed. Therefore, the reduction in IQ scores at higher levels of fluoride exposure in childhood does not become that evident. But over and over again, you're going to see. So, I have a ton of these. Let's keep. Fluoride exposure, dopamine relative gene polymorphisms, and intelligence, a cross-sectional study in China. The urine fluoride was inversely associated with IQ. IQ of children with high activity MAOA genotype was lower than IQ of those with the low activity of female heterozygote and genotype. You can go to PubMed and study this. You can search fluoride and IQ, fluoride and cancer, fluoride and thyroid, fluoride and bone osteoporosis, you name it. It's harming us. Fluoride exposure and indicators of thyroid function in the Canadian population, indications of community water fluoridation, fluoride exposure in early life as a possible root cause of disease in later life, prenatal fluoride exposure and cognitive outcomes in children in Mexico. So let's look at some of the most recent data and what's actually happening and the consequences at a community level on the intelligence of the population base. Okay, I'm actually gonna get out of the way on this one so you can view it full screen.
The impact of fluoride on brain development. For years, we were led to believe that fluoride is safe.
Dr. Harold Hodge, a distinguished toxicologist on the Rochester team, has carefully investigated the safety of fluoridation.
Well, to put it very simply, fluoride is safe at 1 part per million. Now, we sometimes say, is fluoride poison? Yes, of course it's a poison. In large doses.
Is fluoride really safe? Let's look at what we've learned over the past century. In the 1930s, a dentist discovered that children who drank water with naturally high levels of fluoride had fluorosis, the staining or mottling of teeth. Children with fluorosis had about 5 fewer cavities than children without fluorosis. Next, scientists showed that adding fluoride to drinking water led to less tooth decay. Unfortunately, tooth mottling increased as more fluoride was added to water. The optimal range or sweet spot to prevent tooth decay and minimize mottling was about 1 part per million. Meanwhile, the sugar industry, which knew sugar caused tooth decay, promoted the use of fluoride and mounted a campaign to thwart efforts to reduce sugar consumption. Then, beginning in the 1970s, soon after fluoride was added to toothpaste, cavities declined sharply in countries with water fluoridation, but they also declined in countries without fluoridation. Today, about 75% of Americans and 38% of Canadians drink fluoridated water. A new study showed that water fluoridation prevents about 1 cavity per child. Still, over 90% of Americans have tooth decay. Meanwhile, scientists began to find clues that fluoride was toxic to the developing brain. Everybody agrees that fluoride is toxic at very high levels. What about lower levels? In over a dozen studies, mostly from China, children who lived in villages with naturally high levels of fluoride had about 7 fewer IQ points than children in other villages, but those levels were somewhat higher than levels found in North America. 2 newer studies of pregnant women and their children, one in Mexico where fluoride is added to salt, and the other one in Canada where fluoride is added to water, also found that fluoride led to IQ deficits in children. As fluoride levels increased in pregnant women from 0.1 part per million to 1 part per million, the IQ scores of their children dropped by about 3 to 5 points. What about infants? As fluoride increased in infants, their IQ scores dropped further, especially in formula-fed babies. Infants who are fed formula made with fluoridated tap water ingest more fluoride than a breastfed infant. Breast milk contains very little fluoride. Some critics say that because our study was an observational study, we didn't dose pregnant women with fluoride like a drug study, it was inconclusive. But if we dismissed all observational studies, we'd have little evidence that water fluoridation prevents tooth decay. Some critics say it's only one study, but that ignores over a dozen high-quality studies showing that fluoride is toxic to the developing brain. Some critics say it's of little consequence if a child loses 3 to 5 IQ points. Is it worth losing 3 to 5 IQ points to prevent one cavity? Let's look at the impact of reducing children's IQ scores by 5 points. Most of us have IQ scores that fall between 85 and 115 points. Only 2.5% of children have an IQ above 130, which is considered gifted. There are about 6 million children in this group. On the other end of the distribution, another 2.5% of children have an IQ below 70, which is considered challenged. A 5-point drop in IQ results in a 57% increase in the number of children that are challenged, from 6 million to 9.4 million. There is a corresponding decrease in the number of children that are gifted, from 6 million to 2.4 million. What's more, children are often exposed to many chemicals that impair brain development, like lead, air pollution, pesticides, and fluoride. The impact of 3 or 4 toxic chemicals adds up and greatly increases the number of children who are challenged. What can you do? Pregnant women and infants should reduce fluoride ingestion. After all, it only benefits children once their teeth have erupted. If you are pregnant, don't drink fluoridated water or black tea. If possible, breastfeed your baby. Otherwise, don't use fluoridated water to make infant formula. Children should only use a rice-size amount of toothpaste when they brush their teeth, not the amount shown on toothpaste commercials, and they shouldn't swallow it. Adding fluoride to water isn't the only way to prevent cavities. You can choose not to buy products from companies that market sweetened drinks and highly processed foods to children. After all, sugar is the main cause of tooth decay.
Okay, interesting, right? That bell curve demonstration is probably the most important part of that, to recognize the huge effect that this has on the population as a whole. If you can see me here. Shifting the intelligence of the population as a whole, dumber, right? Causing more in the challenge group, less in the gifted group, and the average intelligence shifts down quite a bit. And that's just looking at fluoride, right? And then when they say, well, and it gets even worse when you're looking at the compound effect of other issues that are reducing IQ and causing additional brain damage. Lead, mercury, we're not even talking about vaccines, but that's a huge one. Pesticides, and they don't even talk about other things like plastics and flame retardants and things that we're exposed to every single day. This is a dumbing down of the population. So one of the best books that really puts it all together is Health and Nutrition Secrets That Can Save Your Life. I plug it all the time, but there's a huge chapter on fluoride, and they talk about all the systemic issues from cancers, thyroid, infertility, the brain, genetic issues, DNA damage. Really dives into all the science just that fluoride does to us. But he really hits that bell curve data. He says, it's important to realize that these effects conform to a bell-shaped curve, with the number of children having IQs below 70 increasing as much as 21%. And 70 is like that challenged mental retardation area. As well as marked decrease in the number of children having IQs in that higher range on the gifted side. So you have more severely impaired children as well as fewer highly intelligent children. Fluoridation represents nothing less than the chemical dumbing down of future generations. And that issue is compounded over and over again because we're attacked in so many different ways. But let me just revisit some of the tricks that they use in marketing to tell you it works, right? So
then beginning in the 1970s, soon after fluoride was added to toothpaste, cavities declined sharply in countries with water fluoridation.
So they look at the data and go, look, everywhere that we've fluoridated the water, cavities has dropped significantly. And then they leave out the fact that...
But they also declined in countries without fluoridation.
The same thing happened in countries that don't fluoridate. The amount of tooth decay dropped drastically. So what happened? Well, this is just the same type of trend that happened with mortality rates and infectious disease, where there's all these social programs that improved health in general. Roadways, refrigeration, Sanitation programs, access to a good, healthy diet that's going to be rich in vitamins and minerals and healthy fats, saturated fats, things like that. So that's the funny thing is they can just pick and choose data. It's called p-hacking to tell the story that they want to drive a behavior that they want that would justify fluoridation of the water. Okay. Another one that was in there, definitely do not fluoridate your baby's formula. The babies are so susceptible to the brain damage. I mean, let's look at that bell curve thing again because it's so important.
Scores by 5 points. Most of us have IQ scores that fall between 85 and 115 points.
So here's the average person. And let's be honest. These days, average people, they're pretty easily manipulated and steered to believe anything they're told without having critical thinking and going out to look at information themselves, right? And that's, in that conspiracy theory clip at the beginning, becoming kind of a slave to the state. But it gets worse as we have been exposed to things that are lowering our IQ and reducing that critical thinking capacity.
Only 2.5% of children have an IQ above 130, which is considered gifted.
Very few
There are
on the
about
gifted
6 million
side.
children in this group. On the other end of the distribution, another 2.5% of children have an IQ below 70, which is considered challenged. A 5-point drop in IQ results in a 57% increase in the number of children that are challenged from...
So just a 5-point drop shifts that much of the population over into the challenged side, plus that average intelligence goes down. But look, there are studies that show in fluoridated, in areas where fluoride is really high, like 4 parts per million, which they're telling us is actually safe. I mean, you can run your numbers in your county and look at fluoride levels, and they're typically always above 1, right? They're anywhere between 1 and 4 in most places. And then places that don't have fluoride in the water, they will add it typically at around 0.7, okay, getting you just right under the 1. But even at that level, that's way more. A baby's getting exposed to way more than that based on their size and the way it accumulates in their body. So then you add in other factors that we're exposed to, and that shifts even worse, creating this massive amount of challenged or special needs in the community, which is what we face today on a large scale. So we're going to look a little bit deeper into this. Okay, so they mention dental fluorosis, right? And say, oh, it's not a big deal, it's just this aesthetic thing. Well, it is a big deal. And there's skeletal fluorosis and there's dental fluorosis. But basically, fluoride accumulates in our bones and starts causing problems with bone density, with the strength of it, and decay. And so this is a picture of a more severe case of dental fluorosis. But what even got us to connect fluoride with teeth in the first place? It was dental fluorosis, because what we found was that places that had high levels of fluoride naturally occurring in the water had more cases of teeth like this with dental fluorosis. So let's move on. So in the early 1900s, it was observed that children in specific regions of the country had high incidence of damaged teeth. It was later to be determined that high levels of naturally occurring fluoride in the drinking water of those regions was the cause of the enamel irregularities, now known as dental fluorosis, which actually triggered efforts to have fluoride removed from the water sources of those areas. So who the heck suggested we add fluoride to the public water supply to strengthen our teeth? And even worse than that, before they went through and started just putting it across the country and then eventually trying to push it across the world, there were warnings from the regulatory agency saying this is a bad idea. So back in 1943, the American Medical Association on September 18th, 1943 cautioned that fluoride is a powerful protoplasmic poison which damages our organelles like our mitochondria, the chloroplasts, the ribosomes, and its accumulation would become a problem if it was added to the water supply purposely. And then a year later, on October 1st in 1944, the American Dental Association said the potential harm of fluoridated water outweighs the potential good. We knew it was a problem. So how did we get this pushed through? Well, that starts with the Mellon Institute. So there's this guy, Dr. Gerald Cox, who was part of the Mellon Institute. He kind of created the case for it, right? So the Mellon Institute was founded by the Mellon family, who happened to own the Alcoa aluminum manufacturing plants. Now, through his work there, Cox believed he discovered these new vitamins, right? Aluminum and fluoride, that would prevent cavities. But he knew that there was that this was a very dose-dependent thing, and if you went over 1 part per million, it would cause problems. But they went ahead and ran with it, and they hired Edward Bernays, the king of propaganda, the guy that wrote the book about it. And he knew that all he needed to do was convince a couple dental professionals to put an endorsement on this. You know, the whole 4 out of 5 dentists agree that fluoride helps reduce cavities. Boom, that's all they need, is some kind of statement like that. And everybody says, you got to listen to the authorities. It's that groupthink mentality that we're all subject to. So, with the resources of the Mellon's fluoridation team and the social engineering expertise of Edward Bernays, city councils were convinced and legislation started being passed for public water fluoridation only 3 months after the AMA and the ADA expressed their dire warnings, with no measure of safety in place. Sounds like the vaccination campaigns, right? This gave the Mellons and other industrial giants a way to shift liability away from their huge fluoride dumps, from the aluminum industry, from the fertilizers and pesticide industries. They could shift away all liability by dumping this into the public water supply and calling it a health benefit. And then from that moment on, anybody that tried to call awareness to this and say, hey, there's huge risk, instantly labeled as a quack or a loon or a right-wing extremist, just like they continue to do today for anybody that goes against the consensus of the regulatory agencies. So, does drinking fluoride actually reduce cavities? There's so much mixed data out there. It kind of does, it kind of doesn't. Well, you know, it really comes down to who's funding the study to get you the result that you want. So, because there's actually several studies that show that cities with fluoridated water, when compared to unfluoridated cities, have no reduction in cavities, or even that in some cases the unfluoridated cities had even lower incidences of cavities. So the studies that did show a reduction, or at least a couple of them, actually went like this. So the desired narrative was among kids under the age of 6, where they actually showed a reduction in cavities. And it wasn't because there were fewer cavities, it was because the fluoridated group had a delay in the tooth eruption. Their teeth were coming out slower. And because they had fewer teeth, they showed fewer cavities. And that was all they needed to say, see, fluoridated water means fewer cavities, when in fact they were just having a delayed reaction and their teeth poking through, and so there was fewer teeth to be infected with cavities. Pretty crazy. So there's a good study you can go in and read called The Untold Story of Fluoridation, where it kind of goes and shows how it was places in the world that had very high levels of fluoride that were causing great concern, and showing a lot of the fluorosis and damage to the teeth. And really, in the end, there's just these huge campaigns to get fluoride out of the water. Okay, so you guys can go in and start doing your own research. Read books where people are actually calling attention to the real data. And you can go listen to your doctors, but ask questions. Say, okay, so you're telling me there's a benefit that we may have a reduction in cavities. You know, drinking the fluoridated water and brushing with fluoride could reduce cavities by 1 cavity. Are there other ways to do it? Yes, you can reduce your sugar intake. You can make sure your diet is rich in minerals and vitamins and good healthy saturated fats, which will increase bone density and health overall. You need good antioxidants like vitamin C in the body as well. And so you got to ask questions. Are there other ways to prevent cavities and ensure a good, healthy mouth? And yes, there are. You can, like I said, rinse with hydrogen peroxide. You could brush with water and not even use toothpaste and have a good, healthy mouth as long as you eat right. Then you also got to ask, are there risks to fluoride? And can you show me some of the data where you're getting that? Because there's actually a ton of research that shows that systemic fluoride, I'm not talking topical. In fact, when it comes to the benefits, the majority of the data only supports topical application. Systemic doesn't really do anything. on the benefit side. Now, systemic exposure to fluoride by drinking it and absorbing it in your gums when they're putting those fluoride treatments in your mouth can cause a lot of damage. Causes dental fluorosis, as we've seen. Damages our DNA repair enzymes, increases the risk of osteoporosis. It increases the risk of several cancers, bone cancer, skeletal cancers being one, oral cancer, bladder cancer, even lung cancer. Causes genetic damage. Now that's actually closely related to the DNA repair enzyme damage that further down the line creates genetic issues. Skeletal fluorosis causing fragile bones that fracture easily, joint issues, causes abnormal brain development, which we see clearly. We know it's causing brain damage. Destroys your endocrine system. It affects your hypothyroid, or it lowers your thyroid production and causes hypothyroidism. It also calcifies the pineal gland, which is clear and scientific, which actually reduces your ability to create melatonin and several other essential hormones and causes disruption along the endocrine system. So pineal gland, thyroid, and we know it causes infertility or at least reduced fertility, especially in men. So awesome, right? Here's one of the key issues though. How do you control your dose of exposure if it's in the water supply? That means everything that's being watered with the water on the crop side of things and in the soil, it's accumulating high levels of fluoride. You're drinking it, you're cooking with it, you're doing everything you do with your public water with it. You're bathing in it, it's absorbing into your skin and entering your bloodstream. So how do you control your dose of exposure, or how do you even measure your dose of exposure? You can't. It's everywhere. There's an accumulation. So when it's added to the water, we face the environmental accumulative effect, meaning it naturally increases the levels in our food, our beverages. We drink it, we cook with it, we bathe in it, we water our crops. It's present in many medications. It's an anesthetic. It's in the toothpaste. It's in fruit juices. It's very high levels in teas. The tea leaves really absorb it and hold on to it. Grapes, milk, meats, bottled water has it. Some of them at very high levels. Pesticides are based in fluoride, animal feeds. So it's estimated that we consume at least 8 milligrams of fluoride every day in the United States, which is 8 times higher than the recommended safe levels of fluoride. Okay, so now you know some of the risks. So what are you going to do with your knowledge? You're going to apply it in your decision making every day. Okay? And this is just talking fluoride alone. So when it comes to in the body, there's a million other chemicals that it could combine with. So we're in an age of aluminum. Aluminum's in the water. Aluminum's in the food. We're injecting aluminum in the vaccines. What happens when aluminum and fluoride combine? Well, it's called the aluminofluoride complex, and it is highly neurotoxic. So I'm just going to point you to a resource to go read. It's very in-depth, very in-depth. I reference it quite often, but it's really, really good. This is a research study by Dr. Russell Blaylock called Immunoexcitotoxicity as the Central Mechanism of Idiopathology and Treatment of Autism Spectrum Disorder, a Possible Role of Fluoride and Aluminum. And he really dives in to how these two chemically and electrically charged are very attracted to each other in the body. And we're exposed to both at very high levels in every administration route or exposure route you can think of. And so this is actually causing a huge, huge problem, neurologically speaking, in our endocrine system, in the nervous system, across the board. So he systematically goes through how it's affecting each system. First, he focuses on fluoride, then he talks about aluminum, then he talks about the complex together and what it's doing to our body, to our brain, to our hormones, to the pineal gland itself, to the calcification of that, contributing to ADHD, contributing to multiple sclerosis, contributing to Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, everything you can think of, and exactly how it's doing this, causing the cytokine reactions and the chemokines in the autism spectrum disorder. And he really dives into pathologically how this happens. So I highly recommend you guys look this up, read through it. I've referenced it in many of my posts. I take excerpts from it and put them out. And, people just like grabbing little bits of information, and that's great, but you really need to go through and read it in its entirety, probably more than one time to really start to grasp it, unless you're medically trained and understand how to read these studies. For me, I've had to read it multiple times, and every time I read it, I get something new from it, the more I start to learn and understand anatomy, physiology, pathology, and things like that. And so it's really, really important to expose yourself to as much information as you possibly can before you start making simple decisions when the regulatory agencies are telling you it's safe, it's important for you. Stop asking questions, just do as you're told. Take the vaccine, drink the fluoridated water. Don't worry about the pesticides and the genetically modified foods. Don't worry about the fact that the genetic modification itself is causing genetic changes in you. Stop asking questions and just do what we tell you is okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. So just pointing you to different things to get in there and start doing your own research, and I hope you do. Because it's just our daily decisions that are making the biggest impacts on our life. And the more you know, and the more you choose to let go of fear and own your decisions, the healthier you will be. All right, guys. Love you.